when I got here in 2007, coming straight from the state auditor's office, I felt pretty strongly about taking a look at the way money was spent. And when I got introduced to the earmarking practice, I said, this is really dumb and bad, and this is not the way to spend taxpayers' money. So from day one, I said, I'm not going to participate. I'm not going to. It's a flawed process, and it's kind of like being half pregnant. Some people say, well, I'm going to do it until we reform it. Well, that's basically just holding your nose and making the system even worse. So I just said, I'm not going to earmark. I haven't earmarked. I've done a lot of things with my Republican colleagues since I've been here for 4 years to try to put an end to this. John McCain and I have worked together. Jim DeMint and I have worked together. Dr. Coburn and I have worked together on a number of occasions on this issue. So I'm just glad that we've got I want to thank the Tea Party because it is a lot of their activism that made this issue bubble back up to the top, and it's one part of the abuses that are going on. But if we can't get rid of earmarks, then I don't know how we're ever going to do the hard stuff.
Right. And I don't understand, too. We had one of our regular show contributors, Andre Harper. He's a Politico, and he's been on Fox a lot. He was saying that one of the things I don't get is why don't we do, if we need to spend money in like an earmark fashion, why can't they just be standalone, fixed amounts, and have elected officials vote on them with full transparency?
Well, the problem is here, Dana, what this is all about is this is about power, and it's about a system that's terribly arbitrary. Over 60% of the earmarks that were passed in last year's budget and the budget before that went to a relatively small group of people in the Senate, and those are people that sit on the Appropriations Committee. In the water bill last year, half of all the earmarks. Can you imagine the water needs in this country in terms of infrastructure? Half of all the earmarks went to 2 states. And guess what? That was the Republican ranking member of that committee and the chairman of that committee. So this is all about getting in the back room and sprinkling fairy dust. And that's one of the big problems is these are not done on merit. They are very arbitrary.
Right. And you mentioned on your website, too, that you would like to propose a cap on discretionary spending. I mean, and a lot of people, and we talked about how I thought it was a bunk argument that I've heard some make that, these are only a small percentage of the earmarks amount for so little of the budget, which isn't necessarily true because they drive legislation, as you and I both well know. But if we're going to talk about really cutting government spending, what are some of the things that you propose that we do?
Well, I think there's a number of things that we can do. One is we've got to stop writing checks. And this isn't about tax rates. This is about writing checks to very wealthy people and wealthy corporations in this country. I've got nothing against wealthy people. I am very blessed. My husband has been very successful in business. He started out with nothing. He's created a lot of jobs. I got nothing against wealthy people. But I do have a problem when our government is in debt and we're writing checks. For example, the crop insurance program. I want to keep crop insurance in place in this country, but it is so top-heavy with huge profits to the crop insurance companies. In fact, one crop insurance company was able to have a stadium named after him. That's all with federal tax dollars. We're buying Warren Buffett's prescription drugs. I mean, this is ridiculous. If we can't begin to realize that we can't put money into every segment of our economy, which we do right now. We subsidize every segment of our economy with federal tax dollars. So there's 3 legs of the stool. We've got to do discretionary spending, which is why Jeff Sessions and I from Alabama have worked so hard on the discretionary spending cap. We've got to do something about the entitlement programs, and we've got to look at the tax code and make sure it's fair and make sure that we're not screwing the middle class.
Right. Do you think that more Democrats are going to join you in being against earmarks? Do you think that we're going to see something like a voluntary moratorium coming from the Democrat side?
Well, I just came from a brutal caucus meeting. It's been a pretty lonely fight, as you say. Russ Feingold and I were the only 2 that didn't do earmarks in the last Congress, and I just had a colleague of mine, Mark Udall from Colorado, that signed up to ban earmarks a couple of days ago. So there's just 2 of us in a caucus of 53 people. Obviously I'm swimming upstream on this in my caucus, but I think the Republicans have put some more pressure on it. I'm really pleased. Some of the biggest earmarkers, Dana, and this is why people have to be careful about party labels. I think I'm sometimes too anxious to demonize someone who's called a Republican, and I think sometimes people who think Republicans are better are sometimes too anxious to demonize Democrats. The biggest earmarkers in Congress were in fact Republicans, and when earmarking was twice as much as it is now, it was under the Republican Congress. So I'm really pleased that, and I think it is in many ways the Tea Party movement that has put pressure on the Republican Party to kind of fall in line on this, and then I think they're going to continue to put pressure on Democrats to do the right thing.
Well, I would hope so, and I know that your sort of moderate stance on this has attracted some attention, including I was looking at this article earlier from Representative Cleaver, who said that it seemed as though you were going to the center, and that he was talking about your reelection campaign, and he said, and I'm quoting this article from The Hill, any attempt to extricate herself from the president is going to be viewed as an act of disloyalty.
Yeah, I frankly am slightly offended at the quote. Here's the thing. I'm pretty independent, and I was independent when Barack Obama was Senator Barack Obama, and he served with me, and he saw me vote differently than he did on many issues when we were both in the Senate together. And when I endorsed Barack Obama, he knew that door swung both ways. In fact, he laughed about it and said, yeah, great, now you're going to call me and tell me how wrong I am sometimes. And I do that. I mean, I don't call him very often, because he's busy, but I do express, and I'm not afraid to express. I've differed with him on cap and trade. I've differed with him on comprehensive immigration reform. I have rejected the omnibus spending bill. I wouldn't go for another round of cash for clunkers. So there's a long list of things where I think you can remain supportive of a president and still exercise independent judgment. That's what I've always done, and the president knows it, and I don't know where Congressman Cleaver was coming from on that.
Right. Yeah, it was a very weird article.
Kind of threatening, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, actually, I think I had tweeted that. I'm like, is he threatening Senator McCaskill?
I felt like it.
It was a very odd quote. Well, I have to ask you, Senator, too. So does this mean that if we have another instance of another piece of legislation that's similar to the health care bill that comes forward, the health care bill, it had, we had the Cornhuskers kickback, we had the Mary Landrieu's Louisiana Purchase, and there were a lot of earmarks in this bill. That was seemingly the one piece of legislation that you did go for, and it was loaded with earmarks. Do you regret the vote on that?
Well, I got to tell you, those got fixed. The kickback got pulled out. I think it was, in fact, a terrible thing that happened on that bill. I was a little cranky about the Republicans, pounding the podium with righteous indignation, because at that very moment, they were all in the back room asking for earmarks. So, with all due respect, this trying to get votes and trading things for votes has been an equal opportunity problem on both sides of the aisle. Hey, I know your listeners, and I'm sure the vast majority of your listeners think that the health care reform bill was a huge mistake. I can tell you I genuinely believed it was the best option on the table in terms of bringing down health care costs. And anybody who says they're a deficit hawk is not being honest with you if they do not admit if we do not get a handle on health care costs, we can never get a handle on our deficit. We will never be able to regain our footing financially as a world leader. So we've got to do this. I thought it was, we rejected the public option. We made it all free-based in terms of it's going to be on the open market. Insurance companies are going to be competing. They're going to be able to sell across state lines with the different states that can come together. And I know it has really irritated people, but please ask any of your guests that want to rail against this bill if they're against people being discriminated against because they have a pre-existing condition. If somebody who's been sick ought to be able to get insurance in this country, how do we do that without a mandate?